Justin leads an incredible life group here at Ginsburg, and my wife and I have been in it, and it's just a really strong group. It's been a great blessing to us. And so today we're here to talk about 6 questions to start your group off right. And sometimes it can be hard to start your group in a meaningful place, or sometimes we'll just talk about all kinds of random things that don't really deepen the group. So we wanted to give you some tools to start your group off in a good place. And one thing that we wanted to share is often it's not the best practice to start your group with prayer requests. I know I've been in groups like that where they just kind of like dump this mountain of like hurt on the table, and it's not that we don't want to hear about those or get to those, but man, let's start in light and focusing on God's promises, and then come to that. And so did you want to speak a little bit about that and just
absolutely. Sometimes the best way to start off a group, especially a new group, is with some cheesy middle school questions, icebreaker questions. What's your favorite food? Things like that.
What was your favorite show growing up?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, and that really shows your age without asking people for their age.
Yeah.
But through that we can grow relationally rather than just eating a meal together. Now we have something to talk about. Especially if you're introverts like myself. Matt can be a little bit of an introvert. Sometimes we need those questions to help spawn that discussion. So before we can get into those deep questions and really start to build relationships and help each other understand their identity in Christ, we need to understand each other first, right? So 1 Peter chapter 3 verses 14 through 15, it talks about our suffering and how we can understand who we are in light of that suffering through the hope of Jesus Christ. And that's our job as small group leaders, is not to have an event, not to have people come over to our house, but to help them understand who they are in Christ. And the way we do that is by simply asking them questions like, how have you seen God move in your life this week? And inevitably you're going to get somebody to answer that question with their suffering or their hurt. And your job as a life group leader is to reframe their suffering and allow them to see that they are a child of God, and that suffering is not how they get their identity. Their cancer, the death of their mother and father, does not identify them as who they are, but the fact that they're a child of God. That's how and who they should identify themselves as. And through that's where you build relationships with people, and that's where people are going to want to come back, because they understand that they can talk about their suffering in a group, and pretty soon they'll start to turn that suffering into something optimistic. And then you'll see them start bringing people wanting to share that same love with them. So the second question would be, what feels important in your life right now? And that's another question that you can flip that around, right? And allow them to see that the importance of their life is more than that job promotion or whatever it is, right? It's the fact that they're a child of God.
Another set would be, what are you grateful for? What are you anxious about? And what are you learning? And whether you use one of those or all three, that can be a good question. And these can be good questions to put people on a timer on. Like sometimes in my groups, I'll do a start timer and just set 1 minute or 2 minutes on a phone, and I'll pass it around. And that way we get to hear from everybody.
I think you have to in a new group too, especially if you don't know if you have somebody that's going to talk for 4 or 5 minutes.
It's easier to create a culture where everyone gets to talk than to try and reel people back in. That's just like really hard to do. And then another question we had was, how did you succeed in applying what you named to do last week? And so I think it can be really powerful. We'll get into these in later videos on when at the end of a group, have people name what they feel nudged to do, and go around and share that and say, hey, did anyone do that? Did you call who you were supposed to call, or did you follow up on what you felt like led to follow up on? And we can get to hear how people are applying the truths of the group in their life. And so these are just 6 questions that we hope you could reuse throughout your group. And don't be afraid to Google icebreakers and just look into other things that create meaningful conversation, because we can start talking about weather, or maybe your group could even dip into gossip or something if we're not careful. So we want to be very intentional about our time together. And I think another thing it does is it, like Justin was saying with the suffering, it gives us eyes into our group if we're listening. And so we see in Jesus' ministry, there's a great couple verses in Mark 9:33 and 34 where he says to him, hey, what were you guys arguing about on the road? And it says they kept quiet because they were talking about who was the greatest, like I would. And I was like, I'll keep my mouth shut there. And but Jesus then went on to talk to them about true greatness. And so if we're really listening to these questions, we're planning future groups, and we know like, hey, so and so is struggling with this, and so man, how in the weeks to come can we as a group come alongside them and pull in some scriptures and promises of God to help remind them of their identity and their children of God. So we hope these help. Justin, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, no, it comes back to reframing everybody's suffering in your group in the light of their identity as children in God. I mean, that's your job as a life group leader. That's my job as a life group leader. That's everybody's job, even in your family. I mean, if you're not looking at starting up a small group, that's just good advice to teach your children. So
okay. Use these at the dinner table.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, me.
Yep.